And gentlemen, coming to you from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, this is the Spit Sports Show, here to talk to you about the single most overrated coach, overrated executive personnel that I've ever seen in NBA history. And it all comes down to the fact that Doc Rivers did win the 08 title with the Boston Celtics. I'm going to put that out there right away. That title for the 08 Celtics, it reminds me a lot of the 85 Bears Super Bowl. Now, obviously, two different sports, two very different cultures, but what's true in both cases is that single championship, that 1 year of greatness, created an identity for their respective cultures that no other single championship has in the history of sports. Normally, you have to do it a couple times before you become what you become. What I mean by that is the Steelers won a couple Super Bowls before they were, the steel curtain defense, and the Patriots obviously won a bunch of Super Bowls. But the Bears, just off of that 185 Bears year, haven't really been able to get out of that defensive culture that won them that one championship. They've always been trying to win games from a devastating defense since then. They haven't had a quarterback that's thrown over 4,000 yards ever in their history of their franchise. Have you ever thought about their quarterback situations? Have you ever thought about their receiving situations? When's the last time they had a great receiver in Chicago? But they spend big money on Khalil Mack in defense. But the NBA, it's a lot more individualized, right? So that one title in 08 isn't going to change the perception of the Boston Celtics. Their reputation was already well established by Bill Russell and Larry Bird before that. But it did change the perception of their personnel more than any title I can remember in maybe any sport. So let's start with the players. So Kevin Garnett obviously had that one magical year in 2004 where he won MVP and he was able to make it to the conference finals where he had the honor of losing to Shaq and Kobe. But he didn't make it out of round one before that 2004 year, and he was drafted in 98. And after that 04 year, he didn't make the playoffs for 4 years in a row before he moved to the Celtics in 07, 08. So other than that 104 year where he was one of, if not the best player in the world, he was just kind of a playoff bust. Was it his fault? No. But should you get your team to the playoffs at least one of 4 straight years if you're a top 10 player? Yeah, I'd say so. Paul Pierce made it out of round one once in his career before that 2008 year. Again, he played for the Boston Celtics, one of the best franchises there is, and he made it out of round one time before 2008. But because he won that ring, he's looked at as the truth and a winner and a killer and all of that stuff. Same with Garnett. I wonder how Garnett's reputation would have been if he didn't get that 08 title. Would he have been looked at as the hard-nosed trash talker and have the platform that he has today? I don't know. But most of all, who's benefited from that title is the coach, Doc Rivers, who, other than that title in 08 and the following finals appearance in 2010, has criminally underachieved in every single situation he has found himself in his coaching career. So you might think I'm exaggerating by saying that. Elijah, if he's that bad at coaching, then why does he keep getting hired to these marquee jobs? Well, that's the question that I'm trying to answer today, and it's not an easy answer. So his first stop, Doc Rivers, let's take it step by step through his career. First stop was in Orlando. He had Tracy McGrady, who was averaging 27 a night, Grant Hill, who was a tremendous shooter and player, 21-year-old Mike Miller, and some decent depth. They had a good team in Orlando. Not a great team by any means. They had a good team. He spent 5 years there. He missed the playoffs twice with prime Tracy McGrady and 3 times lost in the first round. Twice in those first rounds, he only won 1 game. So missed the playoffs 3 times, made the playoffs missed the playoffs twice, made the playoffs 3 times. And in both of those playoff series, out of the 3, he won a single playoff game. Call that a success if you want to. Just kind of mediocre. Prime Tracy McGrady, you should feel like you could get a second round out of him at least. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy about that, but Tracy McGrady was a top 3 scorer in the NBA during that time, easily behind probably Kobe and Shaq. Probably should get out of the first round. But anyways, doesn't matter. He gets to Boston. And the 3 years leading up to that 2008 year, which I keep referencing because it made his career, he missed the playoffs twice and got bounced in round 1 the other year. Keep in mind, before he got Garnett, he still had a really good team. He had Paul Pierce, obviously, as his best player. Antoine Walker was in his prime. People forget how good he was as an all-around guy. Tony Allen, the best perimeter defender in the world at that point, and it wasn't particularly close. And the year before they got Garnett, they won 24 games with that cast. Now, should they have won a title with Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker as their 2 best players? Of course not. Should they have won more than 24 games? Absolutely. Should they have made the playoffs all 3 of those years? Absolutely, they should have. 08, they get Garnett. They have the magical run. They win the title. Awesome. Like, you got me there. But for 09, he gets bounced by that Orlando Magic team, who was nowhere near as good as the Celtics, although they were nowhere near as good as the Cavs either, in my opinion, and they beat them too. Their 3-point shooters got tremendously hot, and Dwight Howard was the best single year of his career. All right, a bit of an outlier. I can't really blame Doc for that 2009 year. And it was hard to call 2010 underachieving, to be honest. This is the best 3-year run of Rivers' career by a mile, 08 to 2010. But in 2010, I will say, even though the Lakers were favored going into those finals, the rosters were similar. But the reason people said the Lakers were favored in that series, if you remember, had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of analysts thought the Lakers had a significant coaching advantage. And they did. Phil Jackson is obviously a better coach than Doc Rivers is. And that was a big factor in the 7-game series, which turned out to be a defensive, coaching, details-oriented finals. And he lost that series. Again, it's hard for me to really, put my foot down and stomp on his throat for losing in the finals to Kobe Bryant, but that's what happened in 2010. So 08 to 2010, great run. Before that, a bunch of mediocre. And then from about 2011 to 2014, he just got LeBron. And that happened to everybody in the East. So again, it's underachieving for sure, but it's hard for me to blame him for it. Like, you have the best player of all time on one of the best runs of his career. It's going to be hard to stop him in that Eastern Conference. LeBron obviously made the finals every single one of those years and knocked Doc's team out in 3 of them. So he gets fired in Boston because he can't beat LeBron. And then we get to, by far, my favorite stint of Doc's career, and the one that cemented him as just an absolute question mark of a head coach in every way possible. Because before the 08 year, he was underachieving with a bunch of good, not great teams. After the Boston years of Garnett and Pierce, he was underachieving, but he had the greatest player of all time hanging over his head, so you couldn't really blame him that much. With the Clippers, though, there's really no excuses. In Lob City, that era, they won 57, 56, 53, and 51 games in his first 4 years there. Remember, they had DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin catching lobs from Chris Paul. DeAndre Jordan, people forget how great he was during this time because he's had so many years now, it feels like, as just an older guy with the Nuggets and various stints with the Nets during his career, but in his prime, DeAndre Jordan was a straight-up problem. Blake Griffin, JJ Redick as one of the top 5 shooters in the league at that point on the perimeter. They weren't great defensively, roster-wise, but I will say Doc was hired there to make them a better defensive team and didn't do that very well. But how did his team perform in the playoffs? Well, let's see. 2014. They lose to the Thunder in round 2. It was a bad loss. The Thunder were very good that year with Durant as the MVP, but probably should have broken through. Although, It was nowhere near as bad as 2015, the next year, where they lost in game 7 to the Houston Rockets. And this Rockets team was not even close to the best version of themselves that they would become. They had James Harden and a bunch of guys. They didn't have a second star at that point, really. And they beat the Lob City Clippers with, again, 3 all-stars on their team. Underachievement of a year. Very bad loss. 2016, lost in the second round to the Portland Trailblazers? Sorry, what? Like, Dame was good in that series, but this was a young Dame. He averaged 22 for that series. CJ McCollum was 19 points per game, and he was 22 years old at that point. And the third leading scorer for the Portland Trailblazers was a guy named Maurice Harkless, who I can barely remember, and he was active in 2016. Obviously, this Portland team was nowhere near as talented as this Clippers team, and they took them out in round 1 in 6 games. Again, vast underachievement from a team that had high expectations coming into the season. 2017, lost in the first round to the Jazz, led by Gordon Hayward and George Hill. What do you want me to do about that? You have Blake Griffin was getting older at this point. DeAndre Jordan was getting, a little past his prime. He got out of his prime early, but you still had a great version of Chris Paul, and flat out, they were a better team than the Jazz were, and it didn't matter because, again, a Doc Rivers Clippers team just straight up underachieved and lost to Gordon Hayward. That's just not good enough, guys. You had 4 years there of 3 all-stars on your team, and you didn't get out of the second round, 3 of the losses being just horrendous. You can throw that loss to the Thunder out if you want. They were just the better team. But losing in 7 to that Houston team, losing in the first round to that Portland team, and losing in the first round to that Jazz team is just bad. 2018, they missed the playoffs altogether. And 2019 happens after that, where the Clippers weren't very talented. They'd gone through a revamp. But Doc had his best year of coaching ever, in my opinion. I think he really established a culture with the Clippers. That was the year with Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams being dual 6th man of the year contenders coming off the bench. Tobias Harris had a really good year that played him into that contract with the Sixers that they've been trying to get rid of since they got it. And they took the Kevin Durant Warriors to 6 games. You can't have a better year than that considering the talent that they had. And because of that culture that was established, a superstar looming wanted to come and join that team, partially to join that culture, partially to stick it to LeBron, whatever you want to say. Kawhi Leonard joins the Clippers in 2020 during that offseason and brings Paul George with him to add to this Doc Rivers culture. It's a perfect fit, right? Kawhi and Paul George, great defenders to add on to Doc's defensive system. You've got a team that looks primed to take the next step after a great show of a year with not much talent, taking the Warriors to 6. What are they going to do? Choke maybe the greatest collapse in NBA history in the bubble to the Nuggets out 3-1. During that year, you would not believe the amount of media that picked that Clippers team to win the championship. It was the popular, cool thing to do, to pick that Clippers team because they had 2 of the best wing defenders in the world. Lou Williams was still at least on the edge of the end of his prime. Harrell was still there, and they just had a really great overall team on paper. They lost in 7 in the second round to a Nuggets team that had not yet established anything in the league. Now, we know what the Nuggets eventually became, but they lost in 5 the next round to the Lakers. It's not like that Nuggets team was the juggernaut they are nowadays. In 2020, they were good. The Clippers should not have lost that series. Kawhi Leonard choked, don't get me wrong. Paul George choked, but Doc Rivers choked. I don't know if you remember some of those rotational decisions he was making during that series, but they were just awful. Collapse job by Doc Rivers. Then, after that collapse, where he had the most talented team in the world with a prime opportunity to win the championship, he gets fired. Rightfully so. And where does he go? To another blessed opportunity with Joel Embiid, who's slowly starting to become the best player in the world, or one of them for sure, with Ben Simmons and James Harden later. His first year there was the Atlanta Ben Simmons disaster. Now, how much blame does Doc deserve for not keeping Ben Simmons engaged during that playoff run? I think a lot. He completely lost him mentally. Now, a lot of that has to do with Ben Simmons himself and him not being mentally tough. However, the head coach should be a support system. You know what I mean? The head coach should be able to keep the player from getting in his own head, especially as much as Ben Simmons did, to the point where he had to take a couple years off just to get his head right again. Doc completely gave up on him. He condemned him after the game. He just blamed him for everything that went wrong with the Sixers, to the point where they got rid of him and brought in James Harden, who, again, he couldn't keep engaged after the All-Star break because James Harden didn't make the team. Philly collapsed because of it and lost a series that they definitely shouldn't have lost to the Boston Celtics. That's Doc Rivers' coaching career. And he's still getting prime jobs. Like, explain to me, I just took you through his entire career. Explain to me the stint outside of that 08 to 2010, 3 years in Boston, where he hasn't been just a drastic underachiever. And that's all we have to grade head coaches. Do you overachieve or underachieve with the talent you have? And I would argue in every stint he's been in, except for 2019, he's underachieved with the talent around him. And he's still getting hired to coach the best players in the world. Like, how did he get hired by Milwaukee? I don't know. He doesn't even know. I'm going to play you this clip right now. This was Doc Rivers' reaction to being hired in Milwaukee.
I'll be honest, I told our owners when they called, I said, I don't understand why you're doing this, and they said, one of the things they said was, well, it doesn't matter. We've done it now.
Like, doesn't it seem he's already setting up excuses? Like, I don't know what they were doing. Like, I wouldn't have done this if I were you. Imagine being in my position. Get out of here. You're getting hired to coach Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee, which isn't exactly the New York City of NBA basketball. It doesn't have the media scrutiny and the lofty expectations that these other places might have, even though you have the talent to go all the way. You are put in another, I don't want to say perfect situation, because coming in mid-season isn't easy, but in terms of the roster that you've been put in charge of, it's as close to perfect as you're going to get. And now in Milwaukee, he's 3-7. He's 3-7 with the Bucks. He's been very bad in terms of trying to get their perimeter defense up, which has been their issue all year. He has the most Game 7 losses ever with 10. He's 6-10 overall. He's blown 3-1 leads in his career, 4 other 3-2 leads, and another 2-0 lead for good measure. He's the king of blown leads. He's the king of underachievement, and he keeps getting jobs because he's a good guy, because he knows people in the league, because I don't know. It's baffling to me that this guy keeps getting prime real estate in the NBA, because when you look back at his career and what he's actually done, the results and underwhelming wins, losses, and playoff success, I think would surprise you. Anyways, that is all from me today. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Some big things are happening on the show. We just hit 200 subscribers, so if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about it. Am I crazy? Is Doc actually the right fit for Milwaukee? Where else would he be a great coach in the NBA? What do you think is his best fit? What do you think is his legacy? Please let me know. I am small enough as to where I can respond to all comments. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you were listening to. And as always, I've been your host, Elijah Ford, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.